All right, everybody. We have actual Boston Celtics news to talk about. Training camps here. We're recording this. The first practice of the season is underway. Yesterday was media day. So we're going to hit some news and notes and the highlights that came out of that. Jaylen Brown's got a new shoe. We're going to talk all about that, as well as we are going to conclude our 3-part training camp preview. We got to talk about the bigs. This is the one that everyone's been waiting for. So we're going to get into it here. It's Green with Envy. Let's lock in. What up, what up, what up? Welcome into another edition of Green with Envy, and welcome back to another NBA season here. We're back. We're back fully. Training camp is starting today as we're recording this here on September 25th. Media day was yesterday. We're going to talk all about it. This is your boy Will Weir checking in. How you doing? How you living? Joining me today to get the season started, as he has for now, going into our 5th NBA season, which sounds fucking
Baby.
ludicrous. My best friend, co-host, and the coach of our podcast, the one and only Greg Manakis. What is good?
Man, media day had me pumped. I went to the gym about an hour ago and I was doing some skill work. I was working on my handle, I was working on the 3-point shot, getting some conditioning in. Just really excited about the basketball season. And it was nice to have some actual content that we could talk about instead of trying to manufacture content out of thin air.
For people behind the scenes, just to like peel back the layer a little bit here, when it's dead time, it is so hard to at times, not always, but at times, to really find what can we genuinely talk about and not just feel like we're doing it for the sake of doing it, to sit here in front of a mic and talk for 30 to 45 minutes. And
Right.
having actual players getting interviewed, giving us real content to talk about was incredibly refreshing. And like you said, Greg, it's like in the spring when the flowers start blooming, there's rebirth in the air, right? Like there's a new reason for us to be excited here. So we have actual content to talk about. So we're gonna get to media day in a second. But one of the interesting things that coincided with media day was, of course, Jaylen's got some new shoes. Jaylen Brown, who has been a shoe free agent now for a little bit, as I'm sure you guys are all aware. Nike versus Jaylen Brown, big part of the USA conversation of whether or not that was the reason that Jaylen Brown was not added to the team originally, why he wasn't the replacement when Kawhi Leonard got left off. So Jaylen Brown announced the launch of his new shoe company, which he is part owner of, is the owner of 741 Performance. And for those of you watching on YouTube, we're gonna actually take a look at the website here because it's a little interesting. So, Greg, why don't you pull that up here for our YouTube audience? We can kind of go through this here. The future of performance, and something important to note on this. So it came out today, and I don't know if this was through NBC Sports. I saw it on a Bleacher Report article as well. But Jaylen Brown supposedly turned down over $50 million. $50 million in endorsement deals from other major sneaker companies to pursue full ownership and creative control of his own brand. Present to you 741 Performance. Greg, this is your boy here. How you feeling? What you thinking?
Well, let's just shout out the URL. So it's 741performance.com. I'm going to hit refresh here just so everyone that's watching gets like the full experience of what it's like to go to 741performance.com for the first time. So it's very matrixy. It's got the like the matrix text coming on the screen. Says the future performance, and then down here it says enter best experience with headphones on. Also, the the cursor is light.
Yeah. Okay. Couple quick comments here, Greg. Number one, like you said, there's a Matrix feel to it. It's also a little bit. Did you see the Nike campaign they ran for Wemby with like the alien? It kind of
Yes.
feels like it's in that same vein. And we know JB and Kyrie have a certain level of connection. The cursor being this light or this beacon. I'm sure it has some type of meaning or representation. And just as the numbers do, actually, which is all broken down, there's a reason why it's 741, which we can talk about here in just a second. but super duper Kyrie third eye open type vibes with the cursor here.
Oh yeah, Jaylen's definitely done some ayahuasca in his life.
Or
maybe
he was
that's
hopping
why
all around. Maybe that was part of his excursions over the summer.
maybe that's why he spends so much time underwater. He said that he can hold his breath underwater for 3 minutes, which is absolutely nuts, the
That's
fact that
pretty
he
nuts.
can
That's
do
some
that.
Navy SEAL
Maybe
type stuff
maybe he
right there.
gets
Yeah.
like a rush to his head, some endorphins get released, the third eye opens underwater. But let's let enough of that. Let's go into 741performance.com. We're going to click enter and see what. Okay. Pretty cool.
So
Pretty cool.
the volume didn't necessarily come through on that. I know that if you play it, it does give you kind of like you said, the Matrix soundtrack is kind of what you can picture in the background on it. I think the visuals are pretty cool. Talking about the actual shoe, it's okay. I think it's fine. Two things that I have. Number one, do we not have laces on this shoe? Are we wearing fucking Skechers slip-ons here? Like what is going on with that portion of the shoe? Let's start there because that's a little bit concerning. I'm not saying this is big baller brand 2.0 here. But sourcing your own shoes we've seen it go wrong. Doesn't mean it's always going to go wrong, but we've seen it go wrong in the past. That's Lonzo Ball.
Yeah, I would imagine there are laces underneath. There's got to be a way to tighten it, unless it's like not supposed to be for performance, despite it being called 741 performance.
Right. It
I
feels
like
the
I
design.
like the design in general. I'm just not a fan. I actually like showing laces on my shoes. I'm not like a sneakerhead or anything, but I would rather have the laces showing. It's an aesthetic choice he's going for. Okay. I'm gonna buy the shoe. I've already filled out the pre-order form. I would
Is it
like to
okay?
know how
Here's
much
I
it's
have a
gonna cost.
follow-up
Is it
question.
gonna be like a
Yeah,
Yeezy?
this is my question because this is my other objection. I refuse to sign up without knowing the price, and so give me a price, Jalen.
I mean, if
Like
you
that's all
do a
I'm asking for.
pre-order, it
Like,
doesn't mean you have to buy it.
I mean, you don't have to buy it, but I also, give me a price. Like why are we not sharing a price on a retail item? Like that doesn't make any sense to me.
Let's
But
click on the
once again,
pre-order.
I'm
Let's see
not a
what happens.
sneakerhead. You know, yeah.
So when we
We'll
click
see
on the
what happens
pre-order,
when you.
okay, so here we go. $200 for he got the price listed now. The
Okay.
Rover Black Moon is $200. Okay. That's not exorbitant. I think the Tatums are like 140. So
I've got them at 120 before. I mean, maybe maybe they dropped to 120 after, a certain amount. 200 is pretty expensive for a shoe. I'm gonna be real. That's pretty
I
expensive for
mean,
a shoe.
a good running shoe, like I was looking at running shoes recently, a good running shoe is like 170. So if this is he doesn't have the ability to outsource his production to China and like sweatshops like Nike does, right? So there's going to be some more costs, associated with creating the shoe, I would imagine. So he's got to make up that money somehow. I think 200 is fair. I think that's a fair price for a
I'm not
shoe
saying
that
it's
you're.
not fair. I think it's pricey, but I'm not saying it's not fair. I get why it's 200. It's an independently made shoe. That's
Yeah.
going to be the cost of that's independently made art. That's how that works.
Well, for the kids, the big kids is only 70. So if you're looking to just like get
Shout
into
out
the
to that.
kids
That's
market,
good. That's a
yeah.
good price. That was going to be one of my pushbacks because I know Jalen's all about community and trying to be more inclusive. That's a very inclusive price for kids. So therefore, I 100% applaud that price because as a kid, you're the ones like kids are the ones like think about it like right now. I was wearing my Tatums the other day, the barbershop Tatums that I have. They're kind of falling apart. I probably need to get some new shoes. So
I
maybe
mean, I
this will
have like
be
4 pairs of Tatums.
right. Exactly. And so Tatum also had a new release that we'll talk about here in just a second. And I think maybe I need to pull the trigger on those because mine are kind of falling apart. But as a kid, every basketball year I was getting a new pair of shoes, right? And so $70, that's way more affordable than even if they were 150. Like $70 is a really good price point from a kid's
Yeah, a
shoe
couple weeks
perspective.
allowance.
So yeah, so shout out to Jalen on that. That's really good.
So let's click on Black Moon. Okay, so if we do a pre-order, you can actually. So yesterday when I went to the website, all I was able to do when I clicked pre-order was like enter my information. But
Yep.
now it says that the product will ship in late November 2024. It's got some information about the materials that are used. If we click add to cart,
Does it mention shoelaces?
let's see. Top cover is engineered with abrasion resistant yarns for high stretch and spring back. Okay. So the internal counter, it looks like it says it provides as much stability as a hiking boot, lasting board, distributes underfoot pressure. The external counter holds heel in place. So it might not have laces, Will.
Yeah, I
This
think.
might not have
Hold
laces.
up. I'm gonna let you be the guinea pig on this one. My weak ankles. I wear 2 fucking ankle supports every time we hoop. I'm gonna need some laces to get going on this guy before I make my own investment here.
Okay, I got my size 10, subtotal 200. I'll finish that later. But we don't need to enter my credit card information on live Twitter. Okay, cool. Well, shout out to JB for that. Also, Tatum released a shoe, as we talked about. I actually really like these new Tatum. So this is the Tatum 3.
I believe this is the Tatum 3. What's this one called here? I think it's I don't know if it's like
sidewalk.
This is the
sidewalk chalk. This is pretty fire.
This is pretty good. So there was one other one that I think he came out with that was like kind of like, I don't know if it was tied to like the Celtics team, whatever city look or whatever, but this one is pretty tight. This looks cool. Dude, pretty insane. Like I like, once again, we're not sneakerheads. Maybe we'll get some sneakerheads that can explain this to us. Tatum released a shoe last year. He's already on 3s. I don't know how that works. We haven't gone through a full season with him having shoes, and now he's on the Tatum 3s already. But I do think these look good. I mean, basically all of Tatum's I've been pretty big fans of. Mentioned I have the barbershops myself. Probably need to upgrade those. Those are part of the first collection of JTs. So I might need to get on board with these sidewalk chalks here as maybe my new shoe for the fall and winter season.
Here's the thing about Tatum's though. They're super light. I love how light they are, but it kind of hurts to play in them a little bit because they're so light and they don't have a ton of great support. Like, to me, they're more of like a fashion shoe than a function shoe. I have 4 pairs. I hoop in them. I feel like I've developed a little bit of like a weak heel because of it. Like, I often hurt my heel and I get like a bruise on my foot. If I land wrong or, being 35 years old, not as spry as I used to be. It seems like I'm hurting my feet a little bit more in Tatum's. So I'm okay supporting the team and supporting Tatum or whatever. But if I'm going to support one of the 2 guys at this point, Tatum's got his money through Nike. I'm probably going to lean supporting JB. I've already bought 4 pairs of Tatum's. I really like the sidewalk chalks though. So I'm probably just going to cop those just to have them. And then I'm going to get the JB shoes. And eventually I'll get some JB shoes for young James.
Yeah, but I mean, Jaylen's only made $300 million. Like, I mean, I think the guy needs some help. So I think you're picking the right cause to support here, Greg. Definitely a couple of guys that need some help. Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. But with that, let's go to some media day news because both of them had some different quotes that were interesting. And honestly, like you said, Greg, kind of going back to the top of the show here, it was really fun just being able to hear these guys talk again, knowing that they're getting back in. If you're, I've seen today already some clips from some of the media that are at practice today. But I know you have a couple of quotes that really stood out to you, really focusing on both Tatum and Brown. I have a couple other ones that I can bring up here as well. But what's the first one that you want to start with?
I think the hot button issue coming into the season is going to be Jason Tatum's jump shot. We've talked about that frequently on this podcast, and shout out to Bobby Manning, who asked him about his shot mechanics. And the clip that we're about to play from Media Day, I believe this is courtesy of Noah Dalzell, and this is Tatum addressing Bobby Manning's question about shot mechanics and what he's worked on this summer with his trainer Drew Hanlon.
Going into this year,
yeah, watched a lot of film. Been working with my trainer Drew a lot recently in the last few weeks. Few mechanical things, pick up points, hand placement, getting lower, keeping my shoulders forward and things like that.
Do you feel anything kind of go wrong in the playoffs in terms of those mechanics, or did you kind of just go back and look at it over the summer and see them?
Yeah, I mean, there's some things I could have fixed, but just in the midst of the playoffs, trying to manage, your rest and things like that, it's a little bit tougher. You don't, I'm still playing well, just wasn't shooting the ball as well as I would have liked, and obviously we were winning, so it wasn't the time or the place to try to fix things in that moment.
Your thoughts, Will?
I mean, it's an entirely sensible answer from Jason Tatum, right? Like,
Would you
this
expect anything else?
yeah, right. I mean, Tatum is, and I mean this in a lot of respects. I mean this in a very positive way. He's one of the most manicured superstars out there. Like, this guy is unflappable because he's been bred in a system where he's been talking to media. He's been dealing with social media his entire life. There was never a moment where Jason Tatum kind of was on a track where he wasn't destined to be the guy getting these type of tough questions. Maybe not obviously thinking that he's prepared for, hey, what happens when your jump shot breaks when you're 17 and you just win a championship? Like, you know what I'm saying? But he's ready for basically any question you could throw at him. He's going to answer it very professionally, and it makes sense. Like, he was playing great, and we said this so many times. His all-around game was so good throughout the playoffs that it was just like, man, that jump shot. And I do think part of it, even though definitely there were some mechanical issues to it, part of it was shot selection. There was a few times where he was, maybe 1 for 5 in a game, and that's not great, but then he'd want that kill shot so effing bad, and he might miss 2 or 3 down the stretch. Now all of a sudden it's a 1 for 7, 1 for 8 game, and that looks in feels even worse because he wasn't the guy to hit that, that staple shot. But I like his answer because I mean, it's like, what are you going to do in the middle of that postseason when everything else is going well? You do have to, and the Celtics were winning, so it's like you do kind of have to, grit and bear through that, right? You have to kind of just find a way through. So I think it makes a lot of sense. I know right before we hopped on this, I was just kind of on Twitter scrolling around. I saw Gary Washburn put out a video from practice where it does look like, Tatum's released a little bit quicker, right? Like, he was working on some catch and shoot in the video, and it looked like he was just trying to get it off a little bit quicker. And that's been one of the issues of why catch and shoot has been a little bit of a problem for Tatum, is it's a little bit longer, slower. We talked about the shoulders that get into it and kind of that hitch. And so it looks like he's trying to kind of catch and then bring up, catch it a little bit deeper and then bring it right up so that he can get that shot off a little bit easier. So, we'll have to see. Like I said, this is going to be one of the few topics for the Celtics that I'm ready to react and potentially overreact to either which way. So I'm happy to know that obviously this wasn't just what would have been worrisome is if he went, nah, man, just a slump, and like kind of brushed it off and was almost, frustrated or aggravated by the question. The acknowledgement, the answer, what else would you expect from a guy like Jason Tatum?
Yeah, and it's great that he gave specifics that he was working on, right? He talked about his pickup points, which he's mentioned a lot of times before, and just like when his shot's off, his hand placement, which definitely seems like something Tatum is always worried about, getting his hand placement. I'm assuming he's talking about getting his hand under the ball. And after that, so for everybody on Twitter, I'm going to keep talking to you, as obviously Will just disconnected, but there you are. Hey, you're back. What happened?
I don't know. I went to go look for something and then it just kicked me out. So anyways,
okay. Well, welcome back. Welcome back. So when you're talking about hand placement, I'm assuming he's saying getting his hand under the ball a little bit more. It seems like if you watch Tatum in like a triple threat position out in the perimeter, right? Oftentimes what he'll do is he'll kind of preload his hand under the ball if he's going to shoot a 3-pointer. It's actually kind of a tell that I've noticed just, watching the same guys over and over again. He almost like sets the ball up and lets the defender know he's about to shoot the ball because he gets his hand into a spot where it would make sense for him to shoot. Talks about getting his shoulders forward a little bit. He definitely does tend to like fade a little bit on that jump shot. But I agree with that video that I watched today. I was just really wanted to see if there was any noticeable like first look difference. I could tell it definitely does seem like he's trying to get the shot off a little bit quicker. But time will tell. It's one practice video, and when it's a practice video versus in the game, obviously things change. So it's all about drilling those mechanics.
But hey, listen, this is what I was asking for, right? When I pleaded that, it didn't come from Brett, but I needed it. I needed to see Tatum make a couple of jump shots. He made the majority of the video that I watched. So that at least makes me feel good. Like, all right, he's working on it. It's going in. I just, it's nice to have that as we get into the preseason.
Let's post some videos of us shooting some 3-pointers just for the hell of it, huh?
Yeah. We'll get some up here in the next week or so. We'll get a couple shots up. But Tatum was also talking about, and this is something I think we had touched on when we did our training camp preview for the Wings, which, by the way, if you guys have not watched that, go back in the feed, whether you're listening to us on the audio version or if you're on YouTube, make sure you guys go back and check that out, where we talked about, specifically with him and Jaylen, like they're just entering what is typically known as the prime. The prime is usually about 26, 27 to about 32. That's usually the 5 to 6 year window where it's looked at. This is typically when the true stars and superstars hit the peak, right? Where they're going to be, where it's kind of mixing with the perfect time of your athleticism with also experience in your mindset, right? And then at some point when you get toward 32, depending on what you guys and how a player ages, then it's your mindset, and you just become like, we've seen this, like not everyone's LeBron, but LeBron, we've seen he's a mad scientist on the court at this point. He's just dissecting, doesn't have that same level of athleticism. But you go to the end of the Heat era, I think the beginning of that second era of Cleveland, like that's just an insane level that LeBron hit. And that's right in this window that we're talking about, from 27 to about 32 or so. And the Jays are coming off a championship, just Jaylen entering his 27-year-old season, and Jason going to be in his 26-year-old season. So just at the beginning of that. And, Tatum touched on that a little bit here as we talk about, let's play this clip here of him with his best version.
Yes, as accomplished as I am, I just always feel like overall I can still get better. I'm not at, you haven't seen like the best version of Jason Tatum.
So Greg, we kind of already did best scenario for Jason Tatum, but hearing him talk yesterday, acknowledging the shooting mechanics and knowing just how mindful he is of what we're saying as two Joe Blows here with a mic in Austin, Texas, and some internet that's putting it out into the world, what would be the next best version, or what are you expecting that to look like?
I mean, you touched on this in the last pod, just how Jason Tatum isn't the best at anything, but he's above average to great at most things. And if he just continues to become more efficient as a shooter, a playmaker, and a defender, I think you're going to see Tatum reach MVP levels. He might not ever win an MVP, as we've talked about in previous pods, but he's right in that conversation. Top 5 player in the league every single year in, year out. So with Tatum, I'm hoping that he just, like, the little things in his game where you can tell he's not quite fully in his body yet, like people getting in his space, getting him out of his rhythm. Think back to that interview that Andre Iguodala gave about just like understanding how Jason Tatum likes to get into his shots. He's a rhythm player. So if you disrupt that rhythm, you're more likely to disrupt his entire game. Whereas with Jaylen Brown, he's more of like a forceful player. So it's not about getting him out of his rhythm. It's about getting him like uncomfortable and doing things he's not normally going to do. Tatum's going to do what he's going to do. It's just, can you disrupt the rhythm of his jump shot and the rhythm of his steps getting into the lane? And I just want to see Tatum figure out ways to kind of play just, I guess, a little bit more force and not let people take him out of his rhythm as easily as we've seen in the past. Find little cheat spots on the court. We've talked about how he could be this amazing post player, and we've seen that at times. But can we just throw the ball to Jason Tatum in the post 10 possessions a game and get a good shot every single time? And that's kind of where I'm hoping Tatum gets to, is that we take a little bit of the ball handling responsibilities off of him, get him into different spots, make the game easier for him, and he accepts that role.
Do you think Paul George ever looks at Jason Tatum and is like, man, this is everything everyone thought I was going to do, I was going to be? And Paul George has had a pretty good career, but I was thinking about this when you were saying like the differences between Jaylen and Jason. And I think Jason has a little bit of Paul George to his game, in the sense that Paul George makes everything look very smooth and easy when he's on, right? And I think Tatum has a little bit of that as well, but I think Tatum then also developed, the rebounding, he's bigger, he's stronger than I think Paul George is, obviously. And so I think, when Paul George was going head to head with LeBron when he's on the Pacers back in the day, it's, man, he's already good. Like, is he going to keep going? And like I said, Paul George had an awesome career. He's like a 8-9 time All-Star and like 6-time All NBA. All NBA third team should just be renamed the Paul George team, right? Because that's where he is every single year, is on that All NBA third team. But I do wonder if he looks at Tatum and he's like, man, that could have been maybe what I was supposed to be when the hype train was at its peak with Paul George. And looks like we may be having some technical difficulties here. I don't know if Greg can hear me right now. Let's see if we can get this sorted. Apologies here to all of you listening to us on Twitter as well as on YouTube. For the audio version, we'll clean this up just a little bit here. But yeah, so as we were talking here, I'll go on a little bit here while Greg gets relogged in. Yeah, with Jason Tatum, what that future looks like. And the MVP discussion, I think, is always pretty interesting with Jason Tatum. And Corral has talked about this when he was on the show a few weeks ago, where I think it was pretty appropriate. Probably not with this version is it going to happen, as we welcome Greg back into the mix here, as I think his internet is getting up to date here. But I think in the next 2 years, 3 years, and we'll talk about it here in a minute, both Mazzulla and Stevens on Media Day acknowledge, like, hey, whatever happens with this team financially, we're going to have to grit and bear, and we'll deal with it. But right now we have a championship team. And I think with the team as presently constructed, it's not going to be the time for Tatum to win the MVP. I think once they have to make those financial decisions, and maybe a Drew's not here, maybe a KP's not here in 2 years, that could potentially be a time where JT is going to have an opportunity to win a championship. So we'll have to see what that looks like for JT. But, going into this season, I think the fact that both him and Jaylen Brown are, just hitting their prime, that is setting up for a very, very exciting year. And I'm also very excited to welcome back my co-host, Greg Menegas. Greg, what happened? Internet difficulties over there?
Dude, you talked about earlier how we're two Joe Blows in Austin, Texas with mics and internet, and my internet has just been absolute dog shit lately. I don't know what's going on with it.
This is our training camp right now. I kicked myself out of the studio somehow earlier. I left to just, tried to fill the space here talking about Jason Tatum as MVP chances. So, we're making it do here, baby. We're getting our legs underneath us. It's all good. It's training camp season. I wanted to move off the Jays here just for a minute because we spent some time and I had to fill the space right there. Continuing on that,
we do have a JB clip if you want to play that.
We can come back to that because I want to talk about just for a minute here because I do want to get to our bigs preview here as well. But there was two things let me start with one. The first thing that stood out for me was Brad Stevens had a quote that I really liked where he said, if you truly want to talk about the best vet leadership in the league, there's nobody that got us beat. And he's talking about Drew Holiday and Al Horford specifically. Yeah. And one of my favorite things, the way he phrased it, he's like, yeah, the two guys in their 30s. And I'm like, damn, we got two guys in their 30s that are on this team. And, I was which made me start looking through the roster. And man, when you see Jordan Walsh was born in 2004, whew, that hits a little bit different. That's tough to look at. Even though it's tough to look at on paper. But luckily, we've got Horford, who's an 86, and we've got Drew Holiday, who's a 1990. So he's right in our wheelhouse over here. But you really look throughout the league, man. And yeah, if you want to say obviously LeBron and LA, but look at the success that they've had or lack thereof over the last few years. And like it really is true that the mixed with everything that we're saying about the Jays, about Derek White, about Pritchard and Hauser, who were in the same, ESPN 100 classes as Jason Tatum, like all those guys are in their mid to, just starting their late 20s. And then you have the leadership that Drew Holiday and Al Horford bring. And there really isn't better vet leadership in the league that is also still producing, not just a Udonis Haslem, circa Miami 2-3 years ago, just at the end of the bench. Like these guys are still playing meaningful minutes with a meaningful voice attached to it.
Right. My question to you, though, Will, is do you think other teams in the league are scared of the Celtics?
Is this talking about Kendrick Perkins? Yeah, because I'm pretty sure they are. I'm pretty sure it's an arms race to try to keep up with the Celtics here. And yeah, I damn well think that other teams are scared of the Celtics. I think teams
Perk
right
is such an
now,
idiot, man.
I mean, he's turned into a soundbite, dude. I mean,
Yeah.
now that he's not doing any more work with NBC Sports, like that was always what I said. Is there was ESPN Perk and there was NBC
They
Sports.
excommunicated him.
Did they fully? I didn't know that.
No, I mean,
I mean,
they didn't,
basically, he's not on
yeah,
the yeah.
he was their go-to guy. You know, he was their go-to guy. He'd come in on his throne via Zoom or whatever he would do, and they just said,
But
you know what?
he felt like a real
Nobody
person.
liked him.
He feels like the biggest gimmick going in
Yeah.
probably NBA media right now. Like,
Yeah.
and I mean, he flip flops on everything that he says. Like,
Yeah.
one of my favorite things last year was Zach Lowe has talked about this a bunch, where he was saying they got to do, like, I think he's talking about the Warriors and like trading Clay, and so Zach Lowe was like, eventually, all right, what's the deal? Like, just tell me. He's like, they got to do it. I'm like, okay, but like, how? And Perk just had no answer. Like that's what Perk
Did you
is
hear
going to do.
Zach Lowe on Bill Simmons' pod where Simmons was just giving him shit? Like, how many segments you guys gonna do on the Lakers this year?
Yeah.
And Zach Lowe was like, I don't know, man. Like, enough. Like, you're gonna get me in trouble.
I love that Zach Lowe is very honest and realistic. He's like, it's not under my control. Every time we go in there, I'm like, why don't we talk about the Pelicans? And they're like, no, let's do, like, the Lakers are in 12th place. Can they make a run? Like, let's do that for the 19th time. It's like, cool. Like, that would be incredibly frustrating. But yeah, I mean, the Drew Holiday, Al Horford leadership combo, I think that's just so rare to have in today's NBA when you look around the league. And like I said, to be playing meaningful minutes, it's so tough to beat when you combine it with all the other advantages the Celtics have.
The Celtics are the best roster in the league, one of the top 5 organizations in the league, and they've got great leadership from vets who, as you said, are still contributing, but they've also got these 2 young stars that don't have any problems associated with them. They're not problematic at all. The most problematic person of the offseason was Derek White. He got in a fight drunk at a Colorado game, and he's
not on the bingo board. Who's gonna have controversy this offseason? And it's Derek White, which he kind of played it off. It's just no big deal. Got his hat knocked off. Didn't get hit in the face.
Did you hear? He was like, he didn't even hit me though. He just hit my hat.
Yeah. He even tried to downplay it, right?
Yeah,
exactly. Which apparently his teeth are still not resolved. He still has one more appointment to get his teeth. Although whatever he's got, whether they're veneers or crowns or whatever he's got going on, looked like he got some whitening done. They were shining yesterday at media day. Last thing here, I guess two things here, and then we'll transition into the training camp bigs. Joe Mazzulla, gotta love Mazzulla staying on brand. No fun this offseason. Hasn't been fun at all, except for the parade. Only exception to having fun for the entire offseason for Joe Mazzulla was that he enjoyed the parade, which, of course, you could tell he was having a good time with that, parading through the North End with it shortly afterwards. But Mazzulla staying very on brand during media day. And then going back to Brad Stevens, the last part, and this is going to help us transition into the last part of the podcast here. The Kristaps Porzingis update. Kristaps back in Boston. Apparently doing some workouts, doing some light contact, seemingly moving very well. He feels great. He and I think both ESPN had a report that they kind of feel like sometime in December is the target date. Brad being on, just like Joe Mazzulla, being very on brand. No timeline, doesn't want to commit to it, but has to feel good that from all media sources, they were like, no limp. As far as him walking around, didn't seem like there's a limp. KP seems upbeat about it. That ESPN report makes it feel like December. I would still conservatively expect January to be more realistic, just to be extra cautious. But that had to feel good seeing KP back and hearing that he feels great.
Yeah, man. We can talk about the bigs here in a second. I definitely want to touch on KP. I did want to, you talked about Mazzulla. One thing, in case you missed it, if you didn't catch all of the media day quotes and you're getting all of your news from us, Tatum did have this great quote on Joe Mazzulla. He said, Joe is probably the happiest person in the world that I didn't win finals MVP and that I didn't play in 2 of the games in the Olympics. So that was odd. But if you know Joe, it makes sense. Like
crazy Joe Mazzulla.
It's a great quote.
It's perfect. And it totally, once again, it tracks. That is on brand for what we have come to expect from Joe Mazzulla. So with that, Greg, let's go to our final part 3 of our training camp preview here, and let's talk about the bigs. And, you know, of course, we just mentioned Kristaps Porzingis. That's going to be a huge part of it. As we've done for all of these, let's level set here. Here's the guys that we're talking about. We're talking about KP, talking about Al Horford, talking about Luke Kornet, Neemias Queta, and Xavier Tillman. We could throw Anton Watson in here, but I think we kind of know he's on a 2-way deal. Develop, and you know, we'll probably see you next training camp. That's kind of, I don't know if there's much more to add to that, but I think those are the 5 bigs that we really want to cover. Anything else you would add to that, Greg?
No, man. We can start with Porzingis just to kind of touch on what Brad Stevens had said, because he also had a quote. So somewhere in one of his quotes, he was saying that he thinks he's actually like ahead of schedule to some degree, even though they weren't going to put a timeline on it. So that, I mean, I feel really good about it. KP was saying how this was such a rare injury. They put an initial timeline on, but they weren't sure what the recovery would be because not many people have had this injury, and you don't know how you're going to respond. But the fact that he's already shooting, he's already running, and I think he's already jumping. Did they say he's already jumping?
He said he did some light contact yesterday, so I would imagine that involves jumping as well. Yeah.
Right. So that, I mean, that's a huge, addition for the Celtics if they can get him back 2 months earlier than we were expecting. You know, I was expecting like after the All-Star break, honestly, because why even play him? But if Porzingis can get back by Christmas, that would be awesome to have him back by Christmas Day, just make it more fun. But what I'm really excited about is the fact that while Porzingis is out, this is going to give the younger bigs opportunity to develop, right? We're going to see more out of Queta. We're going to see more Tillman Tillman, although he looks like he's 35, is in his mid-20s. You know, he's a young guy.
This is year 5, I think, for Tillman. I think it is like no one's ever fit the senior, like Xavier Tillman senior. He's never fit no one's ever fit that senior name better than Xavier Tillman, right, for a guy who's going into his 5th year in the NBA.
But it is a little concerning how many injuries these guys are kind of dealing with. Like Porzingis obviously had surgery, Kornet had wrist surgery, and Tillman had knee surgery. So Horford is the healthiest big.
And Queta,
yeah. But how much will Queta play this year is something that I definitely want to talk about on this pod. But I think that depth issue is going, like, this is a pretty deep group. I like the 5-man rotation we have with the bigs, but the fact that all of them have some questions about them coming into the season, it's a little concerning for sure.
Yeah, I mean, this is where, and this is what I've started to feel about depth in general across the NBA. It's great for the regular season. At the end of the day, it's going to be really matter whether Porzingis and Horford are the ones healthy in the postseason. Yeah, like that's what I think it comes down to. For the most part, you can survive a game or two where it's not the two of them. As we saw, they survived basically a whole postseason without Porzingis. But that's really what's going to matter. But I think for the regular season, I absolutely love this 5-man unit. Give me 2 to 3 of these guys every single night with the rest of the team that we have, and there's not a single team that really rule us out against.
It's really fun. This is a fun group because you have Porzingis, who's just this unicorn, right? Coming back from injury.
He's the cheat code for this entire team. Like with him, the roof is the ceiling. That's gone. It doesn't matter anymore. Like this is with him healthy. He's the guy that you can say, how can you beat us? Right. Without him, that's where you start to level the playing field a bit.
Right. But like looking at what all these guys kind of bring to the table, it's just like makes for entertaining viewing as a fan, because you got Porzingis who's going to come back, and then you get to see like, oh, when we're fully healthy, we get these glimpses of what this team can look like when we're fully healthy. We got Al Horford, who's Uncle Al. He's just this great veteran that everybody loves. The whole fan base loves.
By the way, said he's not putting a timeline on retiring, that he's not ruling anything out, that he still feels, as long as he feels good, he's coming back. So
I love that.
We'll see.
Well, he's welcome as long as he wants to play. Then you got Luke Kornet, who's just good for the antics. You know, whenever he's on the court, he does some funny things. And then you got Queta, who everyone's going to be so excited to see how Queta develops this year, getting a lot of Rob Williams comparisons this training camp. He's a very, very exciting player to watch and just to dream on. That's something that I think you need as a fan in an 82 game season coming off a championship. Who are the young guys that we can dream on that could add something that we didn't have last year? I think Queta could definitely be that guy. And then you got Tillman, who was a trade deadline acquisition, who never really figured out his role with the team, was dealing with the knee issue. So it's another guy that you can look at and just be like, you know what? I want to see how Tillman functions this year in a double big lineup, the double Al lineup that we saw last year. And, it just makes for a fun group. And then when you sprinkle in maybe some Tatum at the 5, that just makes this front court group even more fun.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be interesting to see how Joe utilizes this group night to night. And we know for Porzingis, he's out until, like we just talked about, December, January timeline. And for Porzingis, it's a very simple best case, worst case scenario. Just be healthy, right? Your health is his best case, worst case, either side of it, especially when we get to the postseason. Be healthy by then and locked in and ready to go. And that's awesome. In worst case, another injury pops up and he's unavailable. That's very simple.
We saw both ends of it this past season.
Exactly. And then with Horford, like, just kind of going through this player by player with Horford, it's pretty amazing how, his entire career, then you just look at him. We went over some of the playoff statistics of where he ends up in the top 50 in almost every major category. And I look at it from last year and we talk about the depth of having all 5 of these guys, all 4 to start the season until KP comes back. And like you mentioned, Tatum at the 5, that's also an option that we saw, if you needed to bust it out in certain games, you certainly could for stretches. And so I think when I look at Al, despite how good he feels, age is a real thing. My guy's born in 1986, one of the few guys that's got us beat when it comes to age. And, last year he played 65 games, played just under about 27 minutes per game, 26.8, because the Celtics have this depth. I'm going to be very curious to see how Mazzulla manages Horford throughout the season. Because I think in an ideal world, I'd probably like to see, he's not winning any awards. I don't give a shit if he gets 65 games. So if we can keep Al around the 60 game mark and maybe around 25, closer to 25 minutes a game, like if you can do that with this group, I think that's a major win because like I just said a few moments ago, when you get to the postseason, you're going to want to be Al and Porzingis. If they're both healthy, that's the 2 bigs. It doesn't really matter about the other guys. They're going to be kind of filler and spot starters if something should happen. But in the best case scenario, come playoff time, it's just Al and KP. And so if you got to have Al playing bigger minutes, depending on those matchups against Jokic, those matchups against Giannis, against Embiid, against maybe Julius Randle, we'll have to see what that looks like. Like I want to have Al as fresh as possible for that. So I think that's for me, the best case scenario for Al is, just keeping that time managed while continuing to be as productive as he's been. And then obviously the worst case is just avoiding father time, right? Just keep ducking and dodging father time as long as you can.
Well, when you look at the Celtics schedule, just like kind of planning things out, thinking around the All-Star break, All-Star break seems to be between February 12th and February 20th, just judging by the schedule. There's a game on February 12th against the Spurs. So maybe you like extend Horford's break a little bit, right? You don't have him play against the Spurs. So you give him an extra 4 days around the All-Star break. There's also a game February 20th against the Sixers coming back from break. You probably want him back ready for that. So maybe just buy him a couple of days there. And you don't play him on back-to-backs. We haven't done that in a couple of years. But then the other games where February 25th and 26th, we play the Raptors and the Pistons. Like that's
do we need to Jaylen's round point? Do we need him in a game where we're funneling the offense through Peyton Pritchard and Sam Hauser? We're still going to get the win.
Yeah,
talk about an unintentional shot of the team. What a blow by JB.
But he did say no disrespect.
hey, no disrespect, Greg. You're kind of ugly, but no disrespect,
No disrespect, no disrespect. Shave your face, man. No disrespect. Yeah, so I think there are ways that we can manage Horford's amount of games, but then just the minutes, 26, 27 minutes last year. If he's at 20 to 23 during the regular season, where we lean a little bit more on Tillman, we lean more on Kornet, and we see what Queta can provide for us, I'm all for that, man. Al Horford doesn't need to be playing near 30 minutes a game. He didn't even need to be doing that in the playoffs, and they figured that out, that Al Horford, if he can give you 20 great minutes a night, that's what you need. Think about like with the Olympics, what LeBron James was able to do in, 25 minutes of action instead of 40 minutes of action. There's a big difference for those guys that are a little bit up there in age. It's allowing them to play in spurts.
Yeah, totally agree with that. And I think that will be the most interesting part for Joe Mazzulla, is how Brad, I'm sure, will be very involved in that decision as to how they manage it. So let's go to the other three guys that are going to be filling in for Al and KP and are going to be in the mix. And I think it's going to be interesting because you're not going to play on a night where Horford's out. Maybe all three of these guys play. If at least Horford's available, you're not playing all three of these guys. So I am going to be very curious to see how Joe feels, who matches up in what scenario better. As we saw, it looks like Luke Kornet is probably the guy that's first up most nights, that he's going to be the main one getting those either backup minutes to Horford, or if while Porzingis is out, we're sitting Horford in a back-to-back. Luke's probably kind of plugged in as the starter, and then we'll figure it out with Queta and Tillman, although it's a new year, so maybe that does change. But let's start with Luke here. And, I think Luke was a guy that going into last year, we were like, can we really win? Can we sustainably win with Luke Kornet as our big for weeks at a time? Answer turns out to be yes. And so I think for Luke, he answered a lot of questions last year, and he's become a fan favorite. That I think for him, it's just about continuing to grow. I think this is either year 3 or year 4 for him within the Celtics organization. Like each year, it feels like he's just become more and more comfortable. And so I think for him, it's just a steady progression of being able to fill those minutes and just bring the vibes.
Definitely. And I also think with Kornet, one of the interesting trends in his career is he kind of came into the league pegged as a shooting big. His first 2 years with the Knicks, he played 20 games his rookie year, 46 his sophomore year. He averaged 4 3-point attempts in 17 minutes a game with the Knicks his first 2 years in the league, and he was shooting 36% in his first 2 years. And then after that, he goes to Chicago for a year, plays 36 games, 3 attempts per game, but all the way down to 28%. Then he's at 25%, 26%, 25%. And then he just kind of stops shooting 3-pointers. So
it's the reverse Al Horford.
Yeah. It's really strange to kind of see that happen. So I think with Kornet, if we're thinking about ways that he can make himself more valuable to this team, especially with Horford getting up there in age, and thinking about just like a Horford replacement, if he rediscovers that 3-point shot where he's at least willing to take a couple of 3-pointers a game and make the defense have to run out to him and respect a little bit of gravity with Luke Kornet, I think that would be a huge boon for this team and for his career. Honestly, he's been in the league 6 years now. And if he wants to play 16 years, he's going to have to rediscover that 3-point shot. So I'd like to see him at least try to shoot some above the break threes.
And I mean, he's a really good free throw shooter, right? 81% for his career, 90% last year, just almost 91%. Like usually that does have a strong correlation to your 3-point shot ability. So definitely something that could be the case for Luke Kornet. Let's go to the last two guys here. Do you want to start with Queta, or do you want to go to Tillman? Who do you want to go to next?
Let's save Queta. Let's talk about Tillman.
Okay.
What were your thoughts, like overall, what were your thoughts on Tillman at the end of last season? How did you feel about that acquisition?
So it's interesting. On court, I thought the fit was a little bit more disappointing than what I anticipated. I thought it was going to be a pretty seamless fit because it felt to me once we lost Grant, what we lost was kind of that big body, small ball 5. Right, that could kind of muscle, and even though Grant was very ground bound, that was something that felt like was a hole, and that was something that I feel like we identified, pretty early on in the season. Like, this is the one spot that we could get better. I think they wanted Tillman to, increase his 3-point range, and it's not necessarily his go-to. He ended up shooting, I think, 28% last year with the Celtics in his time. Just over 28%. From 3, but he was willing to take the shot, number one, which is great. You got to have that willingness and just not be scared. And you saw game 3 against the Mavericks. He hit maybe one of the biggest shots of the entire finals was that 3 that he hit on the right wing. So, like I said, I think it was a little bit disappointing. It was encouraging on media day to hear that he wanted to come back because of how welcoming he thought the environment was here and the team culture. And, sometimes it's a bit of a mystery of like, is the team culture really that great? And with the Celtics, everything points to it being an actual genuine part of why more and more players want to come back. And even these role guys that potentially could get a little bit more money elsewhere are coming back to a situation like this. And I'm kind of excited for that year 2 bump. I think for a guy like Tillman, he's going to get, to a degree, not the same way that we saw Derek White take off in year 2, but you know how year 1 with Derek White, we saw some flashes of, yeah, Derek White's a solid player, but I don't think going into year 2, anybody expected for Derek White to take off the way he did. Not saying Tillman's going to do that, but there was a comfortability and a familiarity with what was around him. And I think we might see that from Tillman this year. And I think out of all the guys that we're looking at here for, especially behind Porzingis and Horford, he's the one that has the biggest differentiator, right? Like he is the guy that can, for certain matchups, give you something that Queta and Kornet are just not going to be able to. And I think he's a very smart player. So I think year 2, I'm expecting it to fit a little better. I think he's going to be more comfortable. And I think also the ways in which Joe can utilize him, knowing that there's going to be a lot of games, up until December, January, that, hey, I've got Kornet, I've got Queta, I've got Tillman. I've got to find a way to make these guys as valuable as possible. I think that's only going to benefit Tillman for this upcoming season.
Yeah, especially when you consider the fact that in the NBA, they don't really practice during the regular season, right?
Exactly.
So he's a trade deadline acquisition. Joe Mazzulla has only tape to go off of and experience playing head to head against Tillman to really understand what he can do. You throw him out there for a couple of games. You use the end of the regular season as your practice to try and figure out what works, but you don't actually have the time to see it beforehand and to plan for it. You're kind of just trying shit out with a trade deadline acquisition, hoping that the scouting that went into it and, everything that he brings to the table on paper could fit within your team culture. And it seemed like that's what they were betting on, that he was a smart enough player, to your point, that he could come in and pick some things up. And he did. He had some nice moments. He had some horrible moments as well, but he had some really nice moments with the team in the playoffs. And I was excited that we decided to bring him back. If it was a or B, would I have had him or Yabusele? I probably would have taken Yabusele after what happened in the Olympics.
I was gonna say, you say that now. You wouldn't have said that last year. You say that now, but yeah, obviously. But
we had signed Tillman before then. But with Yabu taking that vet minimum, I was like, man, how did nobody offer him more than that? He played so well in the Olympics.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see how he works out with Philly. But I think the biggest part for me with Tillman, specifically looking at the regular season, is like you kind of mentioned, if we're trying to buy some time for Al, like maybe around that, that All-Star break, using that as the example, we give him a break maybe against San Antonio, and that game coming back looks like it's against Philly. Like in a game like that where you don't have Horford in a Philly game, like certainly Tillman's not shutting down Embiid, but this is the whole reason that Tillman is a benefit, right? He's another guy you can throw on the Embiid, another guy you can throw on Jokic. That gives you a reasonable representation of what Al would give you on that defensive end as a one-on-one matchup, and it saves Al for the times in which it's really needed. So I think that's the other benefit to Tillman. And worst case scenario for this would be it looks, as you said, there were times where it looked bad. If that continues to be the case, it's a pretty low risk signing for the Celtics. They're going to have ways to either, this is why you have 5 centers. You can either bury him on the bench or you can find a way to move him in a salary move. So it's really not too much of a downside from a team perspective. Now let's go to Neemias Queta, because this is the last guy in this rotation that probably has the most upside, but also has the lowest basement as far as, he could have a stretch of 5 bad games. We just don't see Queta again. Like that's in the realm of possibility. And so is that he has I'm not going to use the word dominant here. That's too much, but that he has a really successful stretch of playing that Rob Williams facsimile that you talked about. And all of a sudden you have, Celtics Twitter and fans going, can you believe, look at this steal that the Celtics got? And there's a lot of room in between those two. And so I think with Queta, he's probably the most interesting out of especially the 3 guys at the back end of the depth chart between him, Kornet, and Tillman.
Yeah, and Queta, his G League stats last year, he averaged like 14 points, 9 rebounds, 2 blocks in about 22 minutes a night. So that's the thing that's so impressive about Queta. When he's on the court, he's making shit happen, and you you feel his presence immediately when he's on the court. And I think that's why people get so excited, is it's like, oh, wow, he did all that in 5 minutes. What could he do in 25 minutes? And then, if you're out there for 25 minutes, your flaws get a little bit more exposed, right? Where teams can game plan for you. They can put you in positions where your weaknesses are tested. And I think with Queta, very similar to Rob Williams, we made this comparison before, but the way Brad Stevens preferred Daniel Tice because he was positionally sound and he was always in the right spot, to Rob Williams, who could be a game changer with his athleticism, but then also could just be too high in a drop and just get blown by for a layup. Like there was these like little things with Rob that he wasn't ready to do yet, where Stevens was just like, I prefer my blankie. I prefer Daniel Tice. Put him out there. I know he's always going to be in the right spot, even if he is a little bit undersized. And then when you have Queta versus Kornet, it's very similar, right? My training camp battle, I don't know if you want to switch to the bottom, but my training camp battle is Kornet versus Queta, because this was something that people started to talk about last year. And I think if you watched enough of Luke Kornet, you understood why he was the preferred backup big, just because he was playing pretty much mistake-free basketball, right? Whereas Queta would come in and he would do some amazing things, but he'd make a ton of like very basic mistakes out there on the court. And it just reminded me so much of early Rob Williams versus Daniel Tice. And that's what I'm hoping this year, because Queta, to me, is a guy that can like be very DeAndre Ayton like on the court on the defensive end. Think back to the way Ayton played in the finals for the Suns a few years back, when he kind of put it all together and he was out on the perimeter guarding, switching everything. Like that's what Queta kind of has the athleticism to do. You see the way that he moves on the court. He has the instincts. He has the athleticism. It's just, can he actually develop the defensive IQ and the processing speed to be the 7-foot physical freak that you can throw out there for 15 to 20 minutes a night and feel really good about it? Because right now it's boom or bust with him. And we need to see him in more situations in which Joe Mazzulla trusts him to just go out there and learn
consistency. That's going to be the key. That's going to be the key for Queta season. Is can you be more consistent the times you're out there? DeAndre Ayton comp, not gonna lie, I didn't see that one coming. That one that threw me off there. The dominating comp. We'll have to see how that holds up. Definitely going to keep that one in the back pocket for check in later in the year to see how DeAndre Ayton and Neemias Queta stack up. But yeah, I'm with you. I think Kornet versus Queta is the right way to look at any type of training camp battle, because like we just laid out with Tillman, he's you're going to be able to use him nightly, but he's also a bit of a specialty player too, right? In the sense that there's certain matchups that he's just going to lend himself to. But on night to night, when Horford's out, or if you're just looking for backup minutes from Horford, do you stick with old reliable, like you said, Luke Kornet, or do you try to go for that boom with Neemias Queta? And can he be more consistent? And it feels like when you watch Queta, it's funny. Some of the times when you look at those stat lines that you refer, you're like, damn, he did all this in 10 minutes. It's a little bit of Angel Reese, where it's like a lot of layups where he just gets his own rebound. And it's like, oh man, he had 4 offensive rebounds. How did that happen? Must have got so many putbacks off of that. It's just his own shots that he's
sitting there
up,
batting the ball at the rim.
Exactly. So it sometimes you got to kind of dig into those stat lines just a little bit, but he definitely had some highs. And so I think he's going to be one of the more intriguing guys to watch. Is when you watch him, it's like there's an NBA guy. There's an NBA rotation player here. But once again, to actually move from, that group of, there's around like 450 players or something around that effect in the NBA. There's about a group of like 150 of them probably that, there's a rotation guy in the NBA that exists, but the reason they're not is they're not consistent enough to be able to warrant those top 7-8 rotation minutes. And it's, can Neemias get there? And I don't know that, with the way that this team is set up this year, it's about him cracking into that top 8-9, but it's okay. You need to show us that there's that potential, because starting next year, Al says he wants to come back. His contract's out. We've got a lot of financial decisions to make. So even if Al wants to come back, it may not be cards to do so. And maybe it's the end of the KP, or maybe KP's a 2-year stint. Like, that's entirely possible with his contract. He's got 1 more year. We'll see how the injuries hold up. And so, next year, you're going to have to source, is Queta a guy that if we need to make these moves away from Al and from KP next year, could we go into a season with Queta, Kornet, and Tillman as our 3 bigs, not expecting the cavalry to come in with KP and Al? How are we going to feel about that? So
right.
That will be the big storyline for Queta this year, but he'll be a lot of fun. I think in training camp and preseason, he's going to get a lot of run, going to get a lot of opportunities, and I hope he gets some of that with the main, with you know a lot of some of the core guys, right, to really see what that looks like. But that's going to do it for this episode here. That's our part 3 of our training camp preview here. We're going to have some more for you guys, working on getting a couple of check-ins around the league. We'll have some team updates for you guys. And of course, as news and notes come out of training camp, we will keep you guys in the loop. So as always, make sure you're following us across social media, lock in on that YouTube channel. Please go there, subscribe, comment. We want to know what you guys want to see. Season's getting started. I know football's in full gear right now, but Pats look like they're going to suck again. Jacoby Brissett, not it, man. Real quick, dude. Jacoby Brissett, I think I underestimated how he seems like a really nice guy. I think I underestimated. I thought he was going to be like, hey, at least we have like a decent professional quarterback. I didn't realize he also can't throw the ball past 6 yards. So pretty disappointing first 3 weeks of watching. And, you know, I don't want Drake May to get killed before he has a chance to show anything. So decently tough start for the Patriots. We'll see how it all shapes up. Maybe we'll bring in Kari Thompson here to give us some updates of what's going on in Patriots land. But for this episode, Greg, any final thoughts before we kick it over to our new outro, which if you're watching on YouTube, you'll get to see it in full.
I just want to give one very quick shout out to our guy, Baylor Shireman, rocking the fresh Dorchester fade. Love it.
You think you went to Mikey? You think you went to Mikey in Lower Mills?
Maybe. That definitely looks like a Mikey special. But yeah, shout out to our guy Smitty shout out to Shireman for getting the Dorchester fade. But yeah, that's it for me. I put together a new little outro here for everybody with a Black Sheep Optimist song that I've had on the pod before called Get This High. Peace, everybody.
Peace, y'all.
Missed free throw. Horford the rebound. Here's Pritchard. He loves these. Puts it up half court of the buzzer.
Every time I get this high, I lose my mind. It don't take much no more until I hit the floor. Every time I get this high, it's you I find. It don't take much no more until I'm at your door. Coming to my core, baby. What can I say? You got me on the floor. You know I came to play. I know I shouldn't, but you seem to take my pain away. And every time I score, Jason Tatum fade away. I close my eyes and I'm floating the river. I call to see if you open. You know I hope you deliver. Every time